Don't call it a comeback, Vecna's been here for years. Do you like clip compilations and greatest hits albums? Then you might like the latest adventure from the coastal wizards of Dungeons & Dragons. I'm GM Jim, and I'm going to dive into this book and tell you what works, what doesn't work, and ultimately, if buying it is worth your hard-earned currency. I'll start with some general, non-spoilery thoughts for players, then get into major spoiler territory after that. If you think you might be playing in it, I'll let you know when to click away before we get there. So, right up top, let me give my thoughts to players. Tell me if this scenario sounds familiar. You get started playing a campaign at level 1, then it takes a year to get your PCs up to level 11 or 12, and by then, everyone is tired of playing these characters and wants to start fresh with a new campaign, and you wistfully sigh about how you'll never get your class's cool level 20 capstone ability. It's pretty common. Well, if you want to live out your fantasies of playing high-level D&D, this could be an adventure for you. There are very few official 5e adventures that go into the high levels, and a lot of DMs don't want to homebrew high-level stuff because balancing combat and other challenges for Tier 3 and beyond is a nightmare. Balance is basically non-existent for high level, and it takes quite a bit of eyeballing and on-the-fly adjustments. Most DMs just don't want to deal with it. So consider pitching your DM on this one if you want to finally see what it's like to go all the way to level 20. Now, spoilers from here on out. Players, please click away. Okay, hey there DMs, let me give you a plot overview and then I'll get into my review of the content. But if you just want the TLDR right up front, I don't really recommend this adventure. We'll get into specifics of why as I go on. So, Vecna Eve of Ruin is a campaign about the Whispered One, the super evil lich himself Vecna, trying to wreak havoc on the multiverse by completing something called the Ritual of Remaking. Basically, this adventure takes the classic story of the Rod of 7 parts, mixes in this Marvel-adjacent concept of the multiverse, and makes Vecna the ultimate bad guy. In some ways, it's a bit like the DM's Guild adventure Doomed Forgotten Realms, which uses the clever concept of, what if all the bad guys won in all the previous official Sword Coast campaigns, like Auril, Acererak, Tiamat, etc., and Vecna was the one controlling them all. Also, I know I'm probably saying Acererak wrong, but I'm sticking to my guns, don't at me. There's a link in the description below if you want to check out this Doomed Forgotten Realms campaign setting. And real quick, since I have you, could I get a like and subscribe below? It only takes a second and it helps us both out. Make sure you click all next to notifications. At the heart of this story is Vecna and the vampire Kaz, the Lich's former general. They were best buds, but then had a falling out over an evil sword. Kaz killed Vecna, leaving behind the hand and the eye. Then Vecna reformed, and they've been bitter enemies ever since. And here we get into mega spoilers, because Kaz is going to impersonate the famous NPC Mordenkainen to get the PCs to retrieve the Rod of 7 parts for him so he can free his buddy Mishka, the wolf spider, and become the ultimate multiverse ruler. This adventure will see the party going to Planescape, the Underdark, the Astral Sea, the Mornland and Eberron, Barovia, then Krynn, then Greyhawk, then Avernus. See, I wasn't kidding when I said it's a greatest hits compilation, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. More on that later. The overall adventure goes like this. First, the PCs discover some cultists doing Vecna stuff in Faerun and learn about the Whispered One's plans. Then the bulk of the adventure is going to all those places I just mentioned to fight baddies and retrieve the 7 parts of the rod. Then the PCs have to stop Vecna's ritual. I'll break this down in more detail in a second, but I'm not going into specifics on every chapter, mostly the beginning and ending. Anyway, in Eve of Ruin, the PCs start in Neverwinter at level 10. You can play through the prequel Nest of the Eldritch Eye first if you want, but it's not necessary. There's also advice here for how to scale down this opening chapter's difficulty if you have lower level PCs. Either way, bad things have been happening in Neverwinter. Cult members have been kidnapping important people who have important secrets, and they're stealing these secrets somehow to fuel their dastardly plans. Here we get a new game mechanic called the Power of Capital S Secrets. PCs can learn secrets from a list in each chapter, and these secrets have mechanical effects on the story. So the party gets hired by Lord Neverember to investigate these missing 1%ers, which leads the PCs to some catacombs. They can rescue each of the 4 victims, and they learn a couple of these special secrets, and also learn about Kaz and Vecna and their falling out. Then the PCs eventually stumble on the cultist ritual and stop it. This opens a planar rift for some reason and pushes the party into the Shadowfell, and also gives the PCs Vecna's Link, the second new game mechanic. This basically establishes a psychic connection between the party and Vecna and grants advantage on insight checks. The link manifests in the story in ways such as they'll feel a cold chill whenever Vecna's name is said out loud, that kind of stuff. Also, now the party can spend these special secrets they learn as currency to gain boons like advantage on all checks for a minute. And then these secrets will become important in the final chapter. Eventually they get back to Neverwinter and time passes, which the book suggests you can throw in other quests here if you need to level up the PCs for the big challenges to come. And the book stresses that no matter how much time passes, the PCs still have this eerie metaphysical link to Vecna, which pops up from time to time. But then we get into the real plot hook of the adventure, the three wizards. Big name cameos from Illustrial Silverhand, Tasha, yes, that Tasha, and Mordenkainen. These three wizards know Vecna is up to no good, so they're working on a wish spell to foil him. But when they cast it, the spell malfunctions, and for kinda hacky plot reasons having something to do with the PC's Vecna link thingy, it instead teleports the party to the wizards in Sigil. Sigil? I'm just gonna say Sigil from here on out. Don't at me. For the rest of the adventure, this supposes Sigil as the home base for the characters if they want to rest and do downtime stuff between missions. Anyway, since the casting of Wish failed, Mordenkainen suggests an alternate plan: find the Rod of 7 Parts. And now I will reveal the super mega spoiler, and that is, Mordenkainen is actually Vecna's former homeboy turned enemy, Kaz. He wants the rod for himself and will use the PCs to get it. So the party now rushes off to retrieve all 7 of the rod pieces, and I'm not going to go into great detail about each one. It's a series of fetch quests, basically. I'll talk about some specifics in my review section, but let's skip to the end game of this adventure. After traveling to get all the pieces of the rod, they knit themselves into one artifact in Sigil. Now, Kaz as Mordenkainen tricks the PCs out of the rod by asking for it, or getting Tasha or Silverhand to ask for it. Then he reveals his true self and escapes in a kinda railroady scene where he absconds to free his buddy Mishka. The final segment of the adventure takes place on the plane of Pandemonium. There, the PCs catch up to Kaz, who is fighting the Spider Queen Lolth, an ally of Vecna's. Now the adventure offers 3 paths: confront Kaz, stop Mishka from escaping, or fight Lolth's forces. Each one is a tough and epic fight. The party will have a chance to reclaim the Rod of 7 Parts and finally learn from Kaz where Vecna is. After, the party can travel to where Vecna is performing his ritual. Also, now the number of capital S secrets they've learned actually matters. Then we have the final boss fight, and the party is supposed to banish Vecna with a magical set of chimes they received back at the beginning. Then, it's over. One thing I find interesting about Vecna's stat block is that he has no legendary actions, only multiple reactions per round. Seems like this works fine, it's just different. I don't think I've seen this in another stat block laid out this way. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. Anyway, finally, we can get to the review parts. Let's start off talking about the good stuff, or the stuff I liked. Remember when I said that this being a 50th anniversary greatest hits adventure is both a good thing and a bad thing? The good thing about it is that the adventure has a wide spread of activities, and even though the whole adventure is basically a series of fetch quests, they're all different enough from each other that the players should not get bored. A couple of them stand out really well, like the Strahd-based one in Barovia, where the much-maligned Death House prequel from Curse of Strahd gets an upgrade. Lots of spooky stuff going on there. And the chapter in Eberron is pretty dope, because the main dungeon is inside the husk of an ancient war colossus. And the segmented fetch quest nature of all this has one other benefit. If you're the type of DM who is not looking to run this beginning to end, and is mostly interested in stripping it for parts, there are a lot of good high-level and suitably epic encounters to strip here. Just replace any of the Rod of 7 Parts pieces with some MacGuffin from your own homebrew campaign, then you can drop these individual chapters into your homeworld however you want. It's nicely broken up that way. Now let's talk about the bad stuff for the parts I didn't like. First, it's kind of a railroady adventure. Consider this line from an early chapter. Other explorations of Evernight are both dangerous and fruitless, so you should eventually steer the party back to the market even if they venture elsewhere. There's a lot of stuff like this, as the book needs you to follow a very on-rails experience to make the story work. Your players might rebel against this, so there's that. Next, a huge percentage of the plot relies on this big reveal about Mordenkainen secretly being Kaz and manipulating the party to do his bidding. There is a brief section in the text about what to do if the players figure it out too early, but it's kinda lame. I mean, I certainly do not think you should give Kaz plot armor, and if the PCs figure it out, definitely let them have that and spoil the twist. While I haven't run this adventure yet, I could see this all being difficult to implement. Another thing, and a negative result of this being a greatest hits compilation, is that there are very few recurring NPCs. The party is always dashing off to new locations and meeting new characters, so it's sort of up to the DM to manage all that. I don't know about you, but I feel like having a solid crew of recurring NPCs helps make an adventure feel like one connected story, rather than a series of unconnected quests. I guess that's one reason the adventure encourages returning to Sigil so often, so the party can touch base with familiar characters. And finally, my biggest gripe with Vecna Eve of Ruin is Vecna himself. He's a crappy main villain. I don't mean his stat block is bad, I just mean he is poorly integrated into the overall adventure. I'm pretty sure we don't meet him until the very end, which is the exact same issue Lost Mine of Phandelver had a decade ago. You'd think wotc would have figured out this problem by now. I mean, I understand why, because Vecna is supposed to be off concentrating on this ritual the whole time, but they're forcing the DM to do extra work to integrate him more, like in visions or dream sequences or whatever. In the final confrontation, there's no bad guy speech. There's zero advice on how to roleplay Vecna. The adventure text literally says he doesn't pay attention to the PCs. wotc is forcing the DMs to have to make the bad guy interesting on their own. So now we come to the main question of this video. Is Vecna Eve of Ruin worth your money? And I think I have to say, no. I mean, if your players are really itching for a high-level campaign and you don't want to embark on that arduous mission of balancing a ton of Tier 3 and Tier 4 encounters yourself, then sure. Or if you are just looking to strip it for parts, then perhaps. But I would not run this adventure beginning to end for the reasons I've laid out here. And that's a bummer, because I really think this could have been awesome. You'd probably have more fun playing that doomed Forgotten Realms campaign I mentioned earlier. But ultimately, it's your game and your campaign, so it's up to you. I'm just a guy sitting in front of a green screen talking to a webcam. Until next time, I'm GM Jim, and you should play whatever you want.